Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vedyat Ravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, who would like to chant this evening? Okay, so we are finishing up. I think we have one more verse in the Manomaya Kosha. What number are we on?
183.
Is that right? 183?
That's what I have also.
Great. Okay.
Manomayo napi bhavet paratmana kyanta tattva kyadhyanta patvatva parinamabhivata dukhatmakatva dvishayatva heto drishtahi drishyatmataya na drishtaha. The mental sheath cannot be the supreme self either, for it has a beginning and an end. It is subject to modifications, pain and suffering characterize it, and it is an object of cognition. The subject can never be identified with the object of knowledge.
So he rounds up this whole discussion of the mind. It cannot be who I am. The suffering of the mind does not belong to me. It has a beginning and an end. It goes away every night when I go to sleep. It's not there in the deepest of meditations. Most importantly, all of its content, the joys, the sorrows, all the feelings are objects of cognition. I am not the mind, I'm the knower of the mind. Let's see. I was talking with a person today, and he's a Buddhist, good meditator. And one of the things he's become really aware of, he says, Jim, I'm just a judgmental bitch. What do I do about that? That's mine. So the first thing we want to do is Sakshibhav. Take on the attitude of the witness. Step back. Secondly, don't believe our minds. It's just stuff. It's nothing but the force of the past maturing. The situation is conducive, the mind is happy. The situation is non-conducive, you're a judgmental bitch. All there is to it. And listen very carefully. Oh, it's because of stuff that I went on in my family of origin and with my father and my mother. All of that may be true. But as old Werner Erhard used to say, understanding is the booby prize. It doesn't fix it. How do I fix the mind? Get out of the mind. Step back. Don't believe what it tells you. This is good, this is bad. And don't personalize. Here's another little mantra for you. I have no thoughts or feelings of my own. None of it belongs to me. Just let them go by. This is the practice. All right, next verse.
New section, Vijnanamaya Kosha. बुद्धिर्बुद्धीन्द्रियै सार्धं सवृत्ति कर्तृलक्षणः विज्ञानमयकोश स्यात् पुंस संसारकारणम्. The intellect with its modifications, along with the organs of perception, form the intellectual sheath, Vijnanamaya Kosha. It has the characteristics of, quote, the agent or doer, which is the cause for transmigration.
So here he calls them buddhidriyas. It's the same thing as jnanendriyas, the organs of perception, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, plus the intellect itself. Oh, wait a minute, I thought the organs of perception were in the mind. Don't worry about that, where you locate this stuff. This is all taken from various scriptures. There's little bits of inconsistencies. Don't get caught up in that. Basically, it's where thought happens. In your head, do the problem 2 + 2. Remember what you had for lunch. Say the sentence, Mary had a little lamb in your head. That place is the buddhi. It's the intellect. It's cooler than the mind where the feelings happen. In the Vijnanamaya Kosha is a mechanism, which here Shankara is going to call karta. Karta means the agent, literally the doer. What does this karta do? Its function. It attributes to the self the qualities of the not self. Sometimes it is called ahankara. Aham is just the first person pronoun. Kara, again, like karta, comes from kri, to make or to do. It's the kind of thinking, the kinds of assumptions that make me feel like I'm a person. Most specifically, I'm the body. It is located in the subtle intellect. Sometimes it's called chit chaya. Chaya means shadow or reflection. It's the reflection of consciousness. Those of us who are doing Panchadashi on Monday nights, Vidyaranya calls it Chitabhasa, another word for the reflection of consciousness. But it gives me the sense that I do. I go. Now, what's interesting about this karta, it's not an entity, it's a function. Thin the mind, or thin the intellect here, and it disappears. Introvert the attentive faculty, go looking for some entity, me. You can't find an individual person. It only seems to appear when you don't look at it. In that sense, it's like a shadow. Any thoughts on this so far?
You can see your shadow sometimes.
You can see your shadow, certainly. But what I mean by shadow, so you've got a light, you've got a person, you've got the shadow. So the shadow only appears when the light is occluded by something. So the sense is, as consciousness is looking out through the equipment, this shadow self, this reflected self, sometimes it's called pratibimba, like the reflection in a mirror, shows up. But it's an event, it's not a thing. That's the most important thing to understand. You can get fat, you can get thin. I was talking with another friend who had a terrible day at work this week. There was some meeting with all his staff, and they turned on him and just read him the riot act. He was in tears. He wanted to jump off the bridge, practically. As we use the opinions of others to form this karta, this agent, this kriti, this sense of self. All right, next verse.
Anuvrajacchi pratibimba shakti vijnana sanya prakriter vikarah jnana kriyavan hamityajya sastram dehendriyadishva bhimanyate brisham.
Go ahead. I got to get out my teaching aid here because he's talking about pratibimba.
Accompanied by a reflection of the light of Chit, the intellectual sheath is a modification of Prakriti. It is endowed with the function of knowledge and is always completely identified with the body, sense organs, etc.
So what do we mean by a reflection of consciousness? So here I have a mirror, a bimba. There we have prakash, light. You see a light in the mirror? Those of you in Zoom land, over there, let's see if I can get it on there. There, I got it on there. Is there a light in the mirror or not?
Yes.
Well, there's a reflection of light in the mirror. There's pratibimba. So the subtle intellect appears, it feels like I am a conscious individual being. That feels so real. And what he says is, what that's happening is there's the reflection of consciousness. Swamiji used to say, the reflection of consciousness caught in the web of thought. That's how he used to do his poetry. But the idea is it's not a real self. In other scriptures, Shankara will use the same idea of pratibimba, a reflection. And if you have 6 jars of water and there's a moon up there and you look into the water jars, you see 6 moons. Is there a moon in the jar? Well, no. It looks like a moon. And if you go to the water in the jar, the moon's broken. So it seems like there's individual people. There's a Ganesh, there's a Mike, there's a Sound, there's a Puneet, there's a Jim. No, it just seems that way. What there is one light, one prakasha. And in these individual intellects, there's that reflection of consciousness. What does that function do? It attributes to the self the qualities of the not self. I'm tall, I'm short, I'm old, I'm young. I'm successful, I'm not successful. I'm handsome, I'm ugly. When in fact, these are always qualities of the body, reactions of the mind, conclusions, doubts of the intellect, and all of it is witnessed by me. None of it touches me. So, I like to use this example. If I were to bring out a bowl and in it was some rice and some raisins, and I were to say, would you discriminate between the rice and the raisins? It might take you some time, but you can make 2 piles, one of rice, one of raisins. If I then brought out a bowl and it was wild rice and white rice mixed, yeah, you could do that. A little harder. If I did long grain rice and short grain rice, ooh, I'd have to take a little more time, measure those grains. Now, could you discriminate between Minnesota rice and basmati rice? It's very hard. I don't know if I could do that. It's very easy to see I'm not a table. That's a very simple and gross act of discrimination. By and large, it's reasonably easy. I don't remember it all the time. See, I'm not the body. I'm ever the knower of the body. Take a deep breath. No, I know those sensations. I can see I'm not my feelings, my judgments, subject, object. Okay, I know I'm not my thoughts. They go by like your hand in front of your face. But can you discriminate between the self and the personal sense of self, between aham and ahamkara, between consciousness and this reflection of consciousness. It's very difficult. Can only be done in a very sattvic mind. Quiet. So in terms of this karta, this agent, here's another mantra. If I think I'm a person, I'm deluded. When I'm in jiva bhavana, the attitude where I think I'm a person, the mind will present a goal, and then there's kartavya, struggle towards that goal. I've got to resolve this problem at work. I've got to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend or get rid of the boyfriend or the girlfriend. I need more money. I need more this. I go to some point. What Shankara is saying here is stop it. Don't get caught up in the struggle of ego. Drop the struggler. Wait a minute. Who am I? I'm ever the knower. I have no quality. I am not the agent. I am not this karta, this ahamkriti, this chit chaya, this pratibimba. So many different words to point to these two things. When I feel like a person, and when I know I'm running. What do I mean by this? Well, I do this and I do that. I do that. That's when you're identified with the jiva. You stop and just, for example, just listen to the traffic. Just tune up the mind a little bit. Who or what hears the traffic? Notice the knower. You see, there's no person there. This is the discrimination between aham, ahamkara. Any questions or thoughts on this? Next verse.
Anadikalo yamahan swabhavo jiva samastavyavahara vodha karoti karmanyapi purvavasana punyani cha tat phalani bhunkate vichitra swapi yonishu vajra nyayati niryatya ऊर्ध्वम् एषः अस्यैव विज्ञान अस्य जाग्रत् स्वप्नाध्यवस्था सुख दुःख भोगः. It is without beginning, is of the nature of the ego, and is called the jiva, which carries out the entire range of activities on the relative plane. It performs good and evil actions according to its previous vasanas and experiences their results. It comes and goes, up and down, taking birth in various bodies. The waking, dream, and other states, and the experiences of joy and sorrow belong to this intellectual sheath.
Yes. So this Vijnanamaya kosha is also called the jiva, the sense of individuality. What do we mean by that? We have an experience of this false creation of an identity every night in the dream state, or every night that we have a dream. So in the dream, you have a dream body, which becomes a locus of perception. Remember what he talked about, how the Jnanendriyas, Buddhindriyas are in the Vijnanamaya kosha. Yeah, that in the dream state. In the dream state, I peep out at the dream world. And I have a karta. I have this ahankara. I have an ego in the dream. And I go up and down and good dream, bad dream. And I have all these feelings. Oh, I'm so happy. Oh, I'm so anxious. But when you wake up, where does the whole thing go? It's gone. Because it wasn't a being. It was something the Vijnanamaya kosha created, imagined. This is no different. Meaning, the feeling that I'm a person, that there's a goal out there and I have to struggle. But I'm in that state, I'm dreaming. The cause of that is spiritual ignorance. The dream is a good dream, the dream is a bad dream, all based on the force of the past. That's all it is. How do I get out? Atma vichara. Remember to investigate who am I? Now we've got to understand that mind states come and go. So I think it's really cool for the two of you who went on a 10-day retreat, then went off to India for weddings and travel and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So my suspicion is when you were on the retreat, your minds got very thin. And I bet that karta, that ahankriti, at least for part of the time, may have disappeared completely. There's no person there. But I bet in India, my trip here, and I want this food, and my friends this, and I that. And it comes thundering back. Now, maybe you maintain your discrimination. Maybe not. I don't know. I wouldn't know. But you have to understand that those very sattvic mind states are just that. They are a mind state. Useful. Why? I like to use the example of the steam on the mirror when I shower in the morning. I cannot see my face. This is like the mind covered in ignorance. So I either open the door, let the steam out, or take a towel and wipe it. Then I can see, oh, yes, that's my face. That's like those moments when the mind is incredibly sattvic. And then like Ibn al-Arabi talks about, it becomes like a clear mirror. You can look into the clear mirror of the mind and go, yeah, there's nobody there. But then when I leave the bathroom, do I need to have a hand mirror to make sure my face doesn't fall off? No. When I'm not looking into the mirror of the mind, I still am me. When are you ever not? Once you get rooted in this, then the knowledge of yourself is not dependent on the quiet mind. Mind has become transformed, first of all, by it, because that ego sense never arises with identification in the end. The woman of knowledge can still say, I'm going to the store. Do you want anything? She can use the language of transactions, of Yamaha. But does she know? That's just worldly language. What I know is I am Brahman. All right, next verse.
Deha Shramadharma Karma Gunabhimanam Satatam Mameti Vijnanakosho Yamati Prakasha Prakrishtasani Dvayavash Paratmanaha Ato Bhavatyesha Upadhirasya Yadatmadhi Samsarati Brahmena. Identifying with the attributes of the order of life, their duties and functions which actually belong to the body, it considers them as its own. The Vijnanamaya Kosha is extremely radiant because of its nearness to the Supreme Self. It is a superimposition on the Self, which, when it identifies with it, suffers transmigration through delusion.
Yes. So when I say, I am 75 years old, I am a native Californian, I am Vivek, I am a retired musician. All these qualities of life, your job, your family, your caste, all of that belong to the body. Its good deeds and bad deeds, its successes and failures belong to the body. None of it belongs to me. I'm always unattached. You can't become unattached, really. You can only realize you never were attached, never were joined, always in. But when, because of the illusion and delusion in the Vijnanamaya Kosha, I have this adhyasa, this superimposition, where I attribute to the self the qualities of the non-self. And again, this agency is so close to the self. Rejuvenation is different. Needs to be a constant practice. Give up the notion that a change in the world is what's going to fix things. Give up the notion that a change in me is going to fix things. Do your duty. Act in the world according to your force of your past, what your job is. Get out. Step back. Let go. Let go. If I think I'm a person, I'm deluded. This is the second part of Shankara's definition of vairagya. First part, that desire to give up attachment to all experiences gained through the senses. Second part, that desire to give up identification with any form of self, starting from the body, up to and including the form of Brahma, the creator. I'm not a successful, powerful person. Next verse.
Section 41. Atman unattached. Yoyam vignamaya praneshu hridi spuratyayam jyotihi uthastha sanatmana karta bhoktya bhavatu padhistha. The Atman, which is knowledge absolute, shines within the pranas, in the heart. Though it is immutable, it becomes the doer and the experiencer because of its superimposition, the intellectual sheet.
So I think this is a paraphrase or a quote from scripture. Does Swamiji footnote
it's
it?
from the
Brihadaranyaka. Yeah, thought so. So actually, I'm going to push back on this verse. The self never becomes the doer, really. The self only seems to become the doer because of the superimposition. Just like you, the waker, are never really endangered in the car wreck of the dream. Sure seems like it. And the solution is not trying to keep the car on the road in the dream. Wake up. Here, Shankara uses a word that we get from Brihadaranyaka, kutastha. It also shows up in Gita. Kuta has two meanings. Help me out here, you Sanskritists. Either an anvil or a mountain. Is that right?
Kuta? No, not that I know of.
How do you translate it?
Stha is to like be
Stha
stable.
established, yeah.
Kuta, I don't know.
That's a word we come across in Panchadashi, right?
Yeah.
All the time, and in Gita. But I was told it can either be an anvil, so everything changes on the anvil, but the anvil never moves, or like a mountain. There's all the weather on the mountain, but the mountain never moves. but we get kutastha, meaning you are established still and immovable. That's the point. I'll have to look at it. Or like the center of the cyclone, everything moves around it, but in the eye, it's still. Nothing touches. But if the Vijnanamaya kosha is covered by ignorance, then this karta arises and attributes to the self the qualities of the not self. Now listen very carefully. This agent, this karta, is not evil. It's not bad. It's just not you. If this karta, this function in the intellect is broken, you get mental illness. There are several forms of it. Multiple personalities. People who show up as different people. Or schizophrenics. You know, we all have an inner dialogue to some degree. For a schizophrenic, it gets externalized. They hear voices, really in their own head, but they don't experience that way. This karta is busted. You see. It's what allows the equipment to function in the world. It's not bad. It's just not you.
So even in the cases where you do get identified because of a situation, that's still okay because you get identified and you get out of it.
Well, in other scriptures, we have different stages of the yoni, you know, and there's those with tenuous knowledge. Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. They're still considered yanis. They're not called jin mukta yet. But when you're identified, you suffer like any other person. But then you remember who you are, and then it's gone.
I guess the example I'm thinking of is like walking on the street and you see a snake, which is actually a snake and not a dog. And you get identified of like, oh, I need to step away. In
Well,
that split second.
You have to figure that out for yourself.
I mean, we did encounter a snake in Andaman, so I'm just thinking of that memory.
But were you always aware that, oh, fear arising? Or did you think, I am afraid?
Sure.
But after a while, you just quit worrying about stupid mind states. That's all they are, stupid mind states. If you really know who you are. So, how do I know when all my sadhana should stop? When doubt ceases to arise. Notice I did not say when all your doubts are answered. When doubt stops arising. When you quit asking all the questions. But when you have no doubts about your essential nature. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll look at Jivan Mukti Viveka. See what happens. All right, next verse.
Swayam paricheda bhumetya buddhe sthadatma doshena param mrinatmaha sarvatmaka sannapi vikshati swayam swata पृथक्त्वेन मृदो घनाविनिव. This Atman, although it is the self in every existing thing, assumes the limitations of the intellect and wrongly identifying with this entirely false entity, it considers itself as something different, like the mud pots from the mud of which they are made.
And again, I'm going to push back on the way in which it's translated. This is a seeming. The self is never really deluded. And I can prove it to you. I can go outside and I can talk to some poor, miserable creature. How are you? I'm miserable. My body hurts. I'm sick. I'm poor. I'm lonely. So sorry. By the way, do you exist? Yes, of course I exist. What's your existence? My existence is misery. Do you know you're miserable? Yes, of course I know I'm miserable. In other words, he thunders, I am. I know. It's never really covered, ever. But in the Vijnana Maya Kosha, the intellect attributes to the self the afflictions of the body, the miseries of the mind, etc. Self never is touched, even in the midst of ignorance. Well, if the self was never touched, why are we bothering with all this damn yoga? Because our minds are the problem. The human mind in the state of ignorance suffers. How do I get out of the suffering? Discriminate between the self and the non-self. Let go of the tyranny of craving. Let go of the paranoid self-obsession of ego identification. The mind settles down. All right, next verse.
उपाधि संबंध वशात् परात्मा युपाधि धर्मानुभाति तद्गुणः अयोगिकारान् विकारी वह्नि त्यसैद रूपोऽपि परस्वभावात्. Even though the Supreme Self is by nature perfect and ever unchanging, due to its relationship with the superimpositions, it assumes the characteristics of these superimpositions and seems to act just as the equipment do. Like the changeless fire assumes the form of the iron pieces when it turns red hot.
So this is one of his classic images of the iron in the forge. So in the forge, in the fire has a dharma. It is hot, it is luminous, and it is formless. The piece of iron out of which you're going to make a sword or a knife or a kitchen utensil is dull, cold, and a solid shape. But if you put the iron into the fire lends its dharma to the iron. And the iron becomes hot, it glows and eventually loses its form. It starts to melt. So also the upadis, the body, the mind, the intellect, are jada. They are inert. You can't have a conversation with a corpse. It does not respond. But when we have the Brahman contact, awareness is not just the luminosity of awareness, it is life itself, because of which the body moves, the pranas act, the mind can feel, the intellect can think. Gita, we get the term asparsha yoga. Asparsha means untouched. Yoga means joy. The touch of the untouched, Swamiji used to say. So even though iron is in the fire and it's borrowing the dharma of the fire, fire's not changed. Blow the iron ball out, fire's just burning away. Likewise, self has this touchless touch. Body, mind, intellect, the upadis do their thing. The self is always kutastha, immovable, still. Don't believe me. Look. What causes me, Jim, the ego, to suffer? When I attribute to the self the qualities of the upadis, the equipment. That's the problem. It's called adhyasa, superimposition. Its cause is spiritual ignorance. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Section 42. What is liberation? Disciple asks.
Oh, I like this. By the way, we're still really talking about the Vijnanamaya Kosha. The next kosha is the Anandamaya Kosha. We haven't gotten there yet. Okay.
Shishya uvacha भ्रमेणाप्यन्यथा वास्तु जीवभाव परात्मनः तदुपाधेर नादित्वाना नानादेशनाश इष्यते अतोस्य जीवभावोऽपि नित्या भवति संसृतिः न निवर्तेत तन्मोक्ष कथं मे श्रीगुरो वद. The Shishya asked, that the Supreme Self has come to consider itself as the Jiva, through delusion or otherwise, is a superimposition which is beginningless. That which is beginningless cannot be said to have an end. So the Jivahood of the Self must also be without an end, ever subject to transmigration. Please tell me, O revered teacher, how then there can be liberation for the Self?
So it's a very good question. Will this sense of individuality exist eternally? Is the subtle body and its identification with the self an eternal factor? Will I just keep going on and on and on, one personal identity after another from incarnation to incarnation? Is there no end to this? Now, the scriptures say this ignorance is beginningless. And the Shishya says that which is beginningless is also endless. But ignorance, though it be beginningless, has an end. This is where Ganesh always gets me.
Row your boat.
I'm thinking of a song. How long have you not known what song I'm thinking of? You had an assumption.
I knew it before you thought about it.
I'm changing the song. You've not, it's beginningless. In every age, oh God, you have been our refuge. Didn't know that song,
No,
did you?
I thought it was Yellow Submarine.
I know. He's heard this shtick too many times. But the point is, once you know, where did your ignorance go? Gone. So even though it was beginningless, it has an end. How? When I know something. Because ignorance in and of itself is no thing. So from time immemorial, I have not known in my subtle intellect, in the Vijnana Maya Kosha, that I am Brahman. I've just assumed I'm a person, I'm the body. I go up and down, I rise and fall, and I'm an individual. And that's beginningless. Another way to look at this beginninglessness is a dream is beginningless. No, Jim, I went to bed at midnight. My dream happened sometime before 7 o'clock in the morning. But in the dream, you never see it begin. They don't roll the credits at the beginning of your dream. When you dream, the mind creates an unexamined, assumed cause and effect past. Who had a dream recently? None of you dreamed?
I had it last week.
What did you dream?
One of my coworkers and I were dodging volcanoes and lava.
You were dodging cocaine?
Lava and volcanoes.
Oh, you were dodging did you question how you got into from your bed into the volcano?
No.
Yeah.
It's because of the cocaine they took.
Yeah, that's probably it. But do you see what I mean? There was no beginning to it. It wasn't like watching a movie where it has a beginning. You see. So in that way, ignorance is beginningless. The point is, the dream has an end when you wake up. Spiritual ignorance has an end, even though it is beginningless. Now let's see what Shankara says.
Section 43, self-knowledge gives liberation.
Is this the answer to the Shisha's question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shri Guru Vacha Samyak Prishtam Tvaya Vidvan Savadhanena Trichana Pramaniki na bhavati Bhrantya Mohita Kalpana The Guru replied, O learned boy, you have put a proper question. Listen then carefully. Things conjured up by imagination, which is itself a product of delusion, can never be accepted as quote facts.
So, the dream is conjured up by imagination, even though it appears beginningless. It isn't anything real. My belief that I'm a person is conjured by the imagination, even though that belief is beginningless. It's not a fact. Now, many of the scriptures will talk about the jivatman, the individual soul. I do not like to use that language, even though some of the scriptures use it. I always prefer to use the phrase jiva bhavana, which Shankara did. I think it was the last verse is when he used it. What's it mean? Bhava means attitude or feeling. It's the attitude or feeling that I'm a person, because it's not an entity. It's a function in the subtle intellect that makes me feel like I'm a person. But the antidote to ignorance is knowledge. What do we mean? We mean knowledge rooted in my direct experience, not just reading it in a book. I have to stop. We do this over and over here in class, and you tune up the mind a little bit. Listen to the traffic or anything, and flip your attention. Who hears it? Who knows it? You see, there's no person there. This is what the Buddhists mean when they say there's no self. There is no self, small self. What's there? Space, consciousness, your Buddha nature. Chidananda. I'm of the form of bliss consciousness. Satchidananda Rupam. Aham Mevaham Avyayaha. I'm of the form of existence, consciousness, and bliss. I am that I am. Immutable. Don't believe me? No. So listen carefully. The self doesn't get realized. The self is ever free. Both bondage and liberation, I usually say, occur to the mind. We'll use the technical terms. They occur to the Vijnanamaya kosha. What is my bondage? Because of ignorance, in the Vijnanamaya kosha, I attribute to myself the qualities of the not self. I am convinced I'm my body. How long have I been convinced of this? Beginningless. What is liberation? What is self-realization? What is enlightenment? The deeply rooted conviction in the Vijnanamaya kosha. Not that I'm a super person, not that I'm an enlightened person. There's an old Buddhist saying, if you meet the Buddha on the path, kill him. It's this deeply rooted conviction based in direct experience, meaning I've thinned the mind. I I've introverted the attentive faculty, and I can see there's nobody there. Aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Neither state affects the self, which is perfect knowledge, beginningless, changeless, endless. Next verse.
भ्रान्ति विना त्वसङ्गस्य निष्क्रियस्य निराकृतेः न घटेतार्थसम्बन्धो नभसो नीलतादिवत्. For the self which is unattached, without activity and formless, there can be no connection with the world of objects other than delusion, just like the blueness, etc., seen in the sky.
Yes, Pranti, delusion. So the self does not undergo a change. I like to say it's not an ontological problem. It's an epistemological problem. The problem is one of knowing, not of being. You rediscover, maybe discover for the first time, what you've always been. In the Hebrew Bible, Moses is put into the wicker basket, sent down the Nile because the Pharaoh's going to kill all the babies. And the daughter of Pharaoh finds the baby in the basket. In the movie, he's wrapped in this blanket, which is made by Hebrews. You never know in the Bible how he finds out he's a Hebrew, do we, Mike? Anyway, so he grows up thinking he's a prince of Egypt. Then in the story, he discovers, no, I'm not an Egyptian. I'm an Israelite, Jew. He did not change his being at all, but his understanding of who he was changed profoundly. What is liberation? It is nothing more than this shift, my deep understanding of who I am. All right, we have to stop here. What verse are we on for next week?
196.
196 for next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om.